Every day I wake up is another blessing. Thankful every second, getting God's protection. I lost connection in the desert, I had no reception. But in that time alone, I probably learned 1,000 lessons. I used my time for introspection and some self-reflection, and analyzed a couple ways to conquer my depression. Everything doesn't happen the way we plan it to, but if we harvest energy, then we can plan it too. So take a look in my eyes, that's where the story lies. I'm telling truth, and that isn't often glorified. I'm showing up, fully present in the moment, realizing self-doubt is my only opponent. So now I'm focused and rolling, the energy is flowing, hoping I stay zoning and my catalog keeps growing. That's the motive, and I'm devoted. My destiny awaits, and I'm not going unnoticed.
Wake up every morning and respect the blessings. Yeah, we made it out, you know that this was destined. Death, pain, scars, love and living reckless. Made it through the storm, yeah, that trip was hectic. Wake up every morning and respect the blessings. Yeah, we made it out, you know that this was destined. Death, pain, scars, love and living reckless. Made it through the storm, yeah, that trip was hectic.
I won't lie to you, baby, I took some summers off, but now I'm back at work trying to cover summer's cost. Had a couple battles, some were won and some were lost, but I fought for my life, I had no other choice. I feel grateful that God gave me another chance, but I don't understand, I still don't fully understand. Lessons learned and feathers earned. You don't think it's possible until it's your turn. Now we fight like we got nothing left to lose. No one else on earth has been in our shoes. Some will consider it paying our dues, but now we rock these battle scars like tattoos.
Wake up every morning and respect the blessings. Yeah, we made it out, you know that this was destined. Death, pain, scars, love and living reckless. Made it through the storm, yeah, that trip was hectic. Wake up every morning and respect the blessings. Yeah, we made it out, you know that this was destined. Death, pain, scars, love and living reckless. Made it through the storm, yeah, that trip was hectic. Wake up every morning and respect the blessings. Yeah, we made it out, you know that this was destined. Death, pain, scars, love and living reckless. Made it through the storm, yeah, that trip was hectic.
That should be it, bro.
Yo, what's up, everybody? Welcome to the Hype It Up Show, the podcast where we explore the world of creative entrepreneurship, YouTubers, and all things hype-worthy. I'm your host, John G. from WHADAFUNK, and I'm excited to share with you guys some stories, insights from the most talented individuals in the industry today. So whether you're an inspiring creator or someone just trying to get inspired tonight, welcome to the Hype It Up Show, and let's hype it up for Cybertooth Cat. So what's up, Cybertooth Cat? First off, thank you for doing this with us tonight. I appreciate you coming through and being on the show. How you doing tonight?
I'm doing amazing, man. It's very, very cool to be here. I'm a big fan of WHADAFUNK, and I love the, kind of the mission of the Hype It Up Show here, getting creatives out there in front of the audience. It's a blast, man. Thanks for the invite.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So I've been following you for a while now. I don't exactly remember how we got together, but we've been connected online for a while now. So first off, Cybertooth Cat is a creative professional from the video game and sports industry, with many years of experience. The creator of Easy Kill 9, and we're gonna tell you guys some more about that tonight. But let's start off. So who are you, and what do you do?
Yeah, so real quick, to give you that anecdote about how we got connected in the summer of 2018, I stumbled across your WHADAFUNK Instagram and said, oh man, I'd love to work with you sometime. And we hammered around a few things or whatever, but the timing wasn't just right, but we just became bros, and we've been connected since then, man. So I'm a huge fan. I got a dope hat, from Zoomies and stuff. So
That's
my
awesome.
name is, yeah, my artist name is Cybertooth Cat, right? I'm known actually by several different names. On Facebook, you can find me by the name Malcolm Zydek, which is actually the name of one of the characters that's in the project we're going to talk about tonight. So on different social medias, I've got different monikers or whatever. But yeah, Cybertooth Captain, as you said, I worked in video games as a character designer and a creative director. I worked in sports as a producer. I currently work as a video producer and editor, but now I'm launching a toy line. And the whole world is called Undead Operator, but the particular group of soldiers that we're launching on Kickstarter is called Easy Kill 9. So yeah, that's what I've been up to lately.
Interesting. That's really, really dope. So, like, when did you first started getting into art? Since art seems like your real background.
Yeah, art's my main thing. I had a stepbrother. I remember being 5 or 6 years old, and I had an older stepbrother who used to sketch some superheroes, and it absolutely fascinated me. And I said right there at 5 or 6 years old, man, that's what I want to do. Like I want to draw comic books and stuff. And it's just been a ton of since my earliest memory. I'm sitting in my bedroom on the bed with a piece of lined notebook paper, trying to draw comic books and stuff, and collecting them and buying them, and just trying to learn how to be good at it. And yeah, man, I've always been an artist.
So that's really cool. So you knew really, really early on what you wanted to do, and like probably before you could even write your name, you were like out here trying to draw.
Yeah,
uh,
yeah.
so like, was it just seeing like your older stepbrother doing it, and you wanted to be like cool like your older stepbrother, or was it like oh you liked comics, you liked watching cartoons, like what was it?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I've always really loved story, any form of story. But when you're 6, you can't really read a novel. So what
Yeah.
you go to is stuff that has some pictures, stuff on TV, stickers, anything that had narrative. And it seemed to me that I wasn't really sure if I wanted to be a writer, even at a young age, because I thought I can do words, but sitting at the typewriter, because this was like the 80s, right? Early 80s. If you're going to be a writer, you didn't have computers or word processors. You'd be at a typewriter. So I don't know if I want to write, but I want to tell these stories, and I want to make movies and do things. But the most accessible thing seemed to illustrate for comic books because it was something that I could do with my 2 hands and a pencil. So yeah.
Yeah, so once you were able to, be a little bit older, did you start collecting comic books? Was that something that you did?
Absolutely. I think the very first comic book I ever bought, again, I was with my older stepbrother, and we were at a little campground, and they happened to have a little bubblegum shop there, and there was a comic book spinner rack. And I bought an issue of Marvel's Defenders with the Hulk, and on the front it had this big 5-fingered mechanoid snake thing. And I remember that comic book vividly, and I remember reading it, and it looked like the bad guys lost at the end. It looked like everybody died. And I took it to my brother, like, am I reading this right? And he's like, that is weird. But when we get the next issue, we'll see what really happens. So, yeah. So then I was into G.I. Joe heavy. When the G.I. Joe comic first came out in the early 80s, Larry Hama was writing it, and Mike Zeck was doing those covers, and amazing people were doing the interiors, and Nam. And, I started with sort of like some war comics, but then just graduated into all things Marvel and DC, and eventually Image and Dark Horse. And, I've collected thousands and thousands of comic books.
That's really cool. So like as you were growing up, like so you're a kid, and then like once you got older in your like teenage years, were you still into drawing at that age?
I think the only 2 or 3 years of my life that I wasn't into drawing was late high school, just because there were so many academics and so many sports and so many girls and whatever else, that there wasn't a lot of time for it. But I still was buying comics.
Mm.
And then as soon as I got into college and my schedule slowed down a little bit, I got right back into art, and I was buying these big, expensive, like 2-ply Bristol blue line professional art boards, and trying to really be an artist and stuff like that and make comics. So yeah, I mean, I've pretty much drawn my whole life.
So did you go to school for art?
So sad story, I went to a 2-year school for graphic design because I couldn't find a school in Michigan that would teach me comic books that I could afford, that was anywhere within driving distance. And by then I was already like a family guy and married, and a young kid or two. So I said, what, I'm just going to kind of do this myself. But I did go to a 2-year school for graphic design with a minor in illustration, and that helped. It really helped to dissect, how design is done, and study the masters and stuff like that. Yeah.
So right now you're working on video editing as well?
Yeah, I work for a big energy company here in Michigan, and I'm on their internal communications team. And so we're shooting, going to shoots, and we're doing drone shots and stuff. And I'm splicing those narratives together, still telling stories, still telling all kinds of stories, but I actually do a lot of motion graphics and art-based illustrative motion graphics stuff for my career as well. So that's very cool.
So how'd you get into video editing from drawing comics and art?
Yeah. So when I realized, in my early 30s, so, okay, being a comic book artist, I probably could do it now. If I really intensely went at it for 2 years, I could, but I can't raise my family on it because there's just not enough money. I said, okay, what are there artistic fields that I could learn quick that pay a decent money? And I found that I'd always loved time-based media and I loved, motion graphics. So I bought an expensive piece of software called Final Cut Pro and learned it and picked up some jobs as a video editor. And there's just many more jobs in video production I find than there are in illustration. Illustration's like very cutthroat, feast or famine. Hey, we've got a nice commission we want you to do, but video editing, you can sort of like know you're getting that paycheck every week. So a lot of the stuff has just been a means to an end.
I see. So speaking of commissions, you do commissions for people as well, right?
I do quite a few commissions still. I've got a really nice big Cintiq digital tablet that my work actually provided for me, but I'm able to use it for my hobbyist and my commission stuff too. So yeah, several times a month, someone will reach out and say, "Oh, I need a logo, or I need a beautiful painting, or I need this character designed, or whatever it may be," and I pick up those commissions. And by and large, I think people are pretty happy with it.
So what is the difference in the creative process from doing a commission versus working on your own artwork?
Commissions are the whole conundrum, right? Of some client or some friend says, "Hey, I want this. Can you illustrate that? Can you depict it?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I can do it."
Hmm.
And I get in there and I start doing it. And then invariably, there's parts of it that I love and parts of it that I think really tell a story, or parts of it that I think are just right. But the client or the friend says, "Oh, I don't really like that. Put that in her left hand and make it a snake instead of a staff." And so doing a commission for someone is still really, in a lot of ways, it's like a job. Like I follow 1000. If you know the YouTuber 1000, really famous, does amazing murals, has done like incredible card sets and really went big time. He did a video about 3 months ago where he's like, "This is my last commission ever.
Mm.
I'll never again do another." And it was like getting let out of prison. He's like, "I love art, but commissions are the hardest thing on earth, right? Even if you're really resonating with the material, because you're answering to this master." But to answer the other part of your question, when I'm doing Easy Kill 9, or I'm doing one of my other dozen IPs that I run that universe, and whatever I'm seeing in my mind, I can bring to bear. And I feel like, if you look at George Lucas or somebody like that, that dude didn't like the way the film groups and everything were getting into his creative. He hated what happened with he did a really, really dope sci-fi film, and I can't remember what it's called right now. Someone will put it in the comments, I'm sure. But after he did like American Graffiti and stuff, he did this really auteur sci-fi film, and the editors in the booth, the senior producers, made him cut out like the last 5 minutes of the movie, so it didn't even make sense.
Mm.
That's what caused him to do Star Wars. He said, "I'm going to fund it myself. I don't want any of your clubs. I don't want any of your money. I'm making my movie." You can
Mm.
see the brilliance, that comes from that. So what I do isn't always brilliant, but I really love working on my own projects versus commissions, although I'll take the commissions because I can really run that world.
Yeah. So speaking of like, what kind of illustrations have you done? Like just comic book stuff, or like stuff for like, tell us some more stuff about that, what you've created.
So I've had to learn to be really multifaceted. I've done, if you ever collect cards, like collector's cards, if when Marvel puts out a movie, or when Star Wars puts out a movie, let's say Star Wars puts out the movie Rogue One, I actually got invited to be what's called a sketch artist, an official Star Wars artist on the Rogue One uh, Upper Deck, or maybe I can't remember the name of the company. I think it was Upper Deck, the card set that they put out. So what they do is they'll send you a bunch of actual cards with the foil print and everything on the back, and this drawing surface on the front. And you draw their characters and stuff right on the actual card, and you ship them all back to them, and they randomly insert them in packs. So
Wow.
I've done art like that, like high-end commercial illustration for big IPs, The Walking Dead, Iron Man, Star Wars, several different Star Wars movies, even Star Wars: The 40th Anniversary, which was a really, really cool set. So I've done really high-end stuff like that. I've done some comic book stuff, but none for like an actual publisher. I created my own comic, what I wanted, and printed it and had it funded on Indiegogo, and put that out there. And I love doing that. So I've done high-end sequential art, but I've also had to learn, as I say, to be really adept. I had to learn how to be really good with like vector style illustration, almost like photorealistic Adobe Illustrator stuff, where you're using the gradient mesh tool and things and making things super glossy and photorealistic. I learned how to do that whole workflow. I was a technical illustrator. So people would send me photographs of the inside of like washing machines and cars and refrigerators and stuff, and I would take the components and make a technical illustration. I've done simple little cartoony stuff. I tried my hand at launching like a syndicated comic strip back when newspapers were still a thing, and I did some of that for a few months. That didn't really go anywhere. But all kinds of things. If it's illustration, I've pretty much done it either as a hobbyist or as some form of professional endeavor.
So you've really done a lot of different types of art. So what is like your creative process like when you're about to like, so do you sit down and sketch it out with pencil? Like what is the actual like how do you get to work like to create the art? I want to know like what's your process like?
So I've got two or three different processes, but I'll just speak to kind of the global whole, right? And my answer today is going to be completely different than it would have been 5 months ago, right? My whole life it's been get out a nice sketch pad, get out some pencils and a technical pencil, get out my ink pens, and do almost everything, hand on paper, right, with rulers and all this type of stuff. But I went to a convention. I went to a big comic book convention a couple of years ago and talked to guys that I really, really respect. And several of them said to me, "You're an amazing illustrator." And I said, "Oh, thanks. Am I ready for work?" And they said, "Well, you can be." They're like, "But I also see you sort of struggling with some parts of it." And I'm like, "Yeah, I do struggle with that part of it." And they were like, "Why are you trying to just draw everything from your head? You're really, really good at it. But why aren't you using extensive photo reference? Like, why aren't you embracing the whole aspect of artistry so that you don't have to struggle with all these proportions?" And again, they had said I was really good. They had said I was ready for
Yeah.
professional work, right, in comic books. But they're like, it's not you're not going to enjoy it as much. So what I did was I decided, okay, I'm going to listen to these guys. I'm going to throw off this thing that says you're a phony if you sometimes trace photos or whatever. And what I did was I put Photoshop to work and started saying exactly what do I want in an illustration. Let me find a picture of a lady sort of doing it, and then I'll switch her hand out, and then I'll change her hair with another photo. And the boots I'm just going to draw from memory. And I began this whole hybrid process of saying, okay, I can get this where I want it to be, but why don't I do it in a third of the time? Do what other artists are doing, use some real photo reference, and get the foundation laid digitally instead of on paper, and then just bring every ounce of imagination I can to the coloring and the mood and stuff. So I'm using like the Photoshop puppet tool and stuff to adjust proportions and really create something that's a little bit more, I think, dynamic and rich so that I can focus on, okay, what do I want the style of this to actually be? What brushes do I want to use? So that's what I'm doing now, and I'm enjoying it way more than a lot of pencil and paper stuff, which is just a very unforgiving medium.
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah.
So wow, so you were actually doing everything just straight off your top of your head? Wow.
Yeah, I really was, and because I, as a kid, again, growing up in the '80s, you can't walk to the library. There wasn't always comics and things at hand, and so I studied anatomy really intensely, and
Mm.
learned where all the muscles and everything were. But even if you know all that stuff, foreshortening and perspective and extreme perspective and stuff, you still don't have that in your brain, right? So those are the things that I spent my whole life kind of trying to become good at once I kind of had the anatomy down. But then you've got rendering styles and all this stuff. So yeah, I really, traditionally as an artist, I would just sit down with a piece of paper and just make art, like no visuals, no reference, no anything. And I'm glad that I did those decades, because now when I do use the photo reference and stuff like that, it's just very freeing because I've got so much of the soft skills kind of already under the hood.
Yeah, that's really really amazing. I want to give a huge shout out to everybody who's watching live right now. You guys watching live could be asking your own question to Cybertooth Cat, and we're gonna be answering. He's gonna be answering all the questions at the end of the show. So guys, ask your question in the forum right now. Just put it in the chat. We'll be answering them at the end. So like, what are some tips that you could give some people who would be interested in the industry, like that you've through the years that you've been doing it? What are some tips that you've learned along the way that could help others just starting out?
Yeah, so if we're talking really purely about illustration, aside from video editing and everything else, I would say one, draw from life. Get yourself in a course or two where some live models and things will come in. Draw from life. Use the techniques they tell you to use. Listen to your instructor, because how enriching that can be for you. If, let's say, you want to be a comic book artist, buy comics, note how they're doing it, but still learn to draw real stuff. Learn how to draw a vase, and spend 5 hours just really laying in the glints and the shading and stuff, because all that creates a well-roundedness so that you can develop your own commercial style when you sort of are ready.
Mm.
So I got that advice as a young person and didn't follow, because I'm gonna draw comics, I'm gonna study comics. You have to study more than that. And also, comics are very vacuous, right? There's this little threshold of style and talent, and they don't really break out from that. And that won't help you if you ever decide after 10 years of drawing comics that you'd rather do something more commercial, or you'd rather paint, or you'd rather do whatever. So don't be afraid to go to a nice school. Don't be afraid to spend a little bit of money, and go to conventions and places where you can meet the artists that you love and ask them what they do. You'd be amazed how much time they'll spend talking to you if they see some talent in what you're doing and you show them some of your art. I mean, some of the best advice I ever got in my life was from a really busy, creative at a really busy convention, who just decided to take 10 minutes with me and say, "Hey, man, I think you ought to think about this." So, network, go to school if you can, like a good school, listen to those instructors, take some live drawing classes, and get a good foundation. But also, don't shy away from that whole digital workflow, because it's definitely the future.
Mhm. So you've mentioned conventions a couple times. How important has it been to for you to go to conventions and to network with other people? How has that been for you in like in the field?
I still think it's incredibly important. It's been absolutely pivotal, really, for me. And I wish I had been doing it for many years before I started doing it, because it's not what you know, it's who you know. It always has been, and it always will be. And if you can roll up to Brian Stelfreeze, who illustrated award-winning runs on the Black Panther comic, and if you can show him your stuff and you can get what he really thinks about what you're doing, and he can tell you you're great, but where else are you going to get that? Are you going to get that watching a YouTube tutorial? You're not going to get that. I'm going to tell you a quick Brian Stelfreeze story, because it'll bring home what you're saying. I walked up to Brian Stelfreeze, amazing artist. First time I ever met him. I showed him my stuff, and he said, "Look, you can draw." He said, "You can just take that outfit off, like you're ready." He's like, "But I want you to change the way you draw," right? And he gave me some great tips, which totally changed my art overnight. But he also said, he's talking about working with editors. He said, "Let's say you want to be, you see, these are insights you can't get unless you talk to them at the show." Because I'm actually going to drop a bit of an F bomb in a second, but you'll just know where the F word is, okay? So we don't get like demonetized or
No,
whatever.
yeah.
He's talking about editors. He's like, it's also not enough just to be amazing. He's like, "You're really good." He said, "But can you give an editor what the editor wants?" Because he's like, "I'm gonna tell you, at the end of the day, you've got that script, but what the editor wants on there is what you're gonna end up drawing, even if you draw it 20 times." He said, "Do you know what an editor is?" He said, "An editor, idiot." And he dropped, and he's talking about every editor he's ever worked for. He's like, "Most of them went to school like to learn literature. Why are they telling me how to make art?" He's like, "You got to deal with that." So that's an anecdote that I love to tell everyone. Like, I wanted to hug Brian Stelfreeze incredibly, because he's absolutely right. But where are you going to get those insights if you don't go to places where you can talk to human beings that are doing this work? The internet's wonderful, but it will always be who you know, not what you know, to accelerate your talent, to become good, to get your big breaks. Even like, I'm launching a Kickstarter, it launched today. We're still going to take our toys to conventions around the country and say, "Hey, we want you to see it in person. We want you to ask us questions, so that we can send people to the campaign with a renewed zeal, because the world's a great big giant place, and we're just a ripple in the ocean on the internet.
Yeah, definitely, because the internet feels like people don't really get the point exactly of what you're doing or what you're like, unless you're actually in person where they could see it in real life and actually like just picking up a book of your art. You know what I'm saying? Like, seeing it in real life is much different than scrolling past an image online or seeing like something online. um so but online is very good too, because you could reach people from different places, like how we've met. You know what I'm saying? Like, we may have never met if it wasn't for like social media and whatnot. So
Yeah.
how important has social media been for you in, either getting commissions or collaborating with people? How important has that been for your career?
It's really critical, of course. I wouldn't be getting any commissions if I weren't online, if I weren't on Facebook and Insta, if I weren't showing my work every day. To give another quick anecdote, I read a book by a guy called Austin Kleon. Every person watching this should read this book. You can read it in an hour. It's a short little book. Kleon is his last name, Kleon, Austin Kleon. And the book is called Steal Like an Artist. And he gives just a bunch of amazing inspiration there. And one thing he said in there was basically, The only key to being good at what you do is do good work and put it where people can see it. You got to do good work, then you got to put it where people can see it. He's like, that's the formula. No other secret. And he's like, with the internet, he's like, in the 80s and 90s, like you had to go to people for them to see it. You had to write letters and some. He's like, now, man, you just got to tag that thing on Twitter or whatever. Somebody's going to find that thing. So yeah, social media is really important. I felt like I'm doing good work, but I was like, I got to put this where people can see it. It's good to go to conventions, but I'm gonna do that twice a year, and meet 30 people. I might meet 3,000 online every month. Let me find a way to get that done. So it's super important. Now, different platforms have different audiences and stuff like this, but you've just got to stick with it. No, it's gonna for 6 months. It's gonna feel like a ripple in the ocean, like nobody cares, whatever. And you're hashtagging it, whatever. And you've also got to learn, of course, to interact with other people. You can't just throw your stuff out there every day and be like, everybody love me. You have got to build real relationships. You've got to go to your people. You got to take a time to leave a comment. You got to leave a heart. You got to DM them. It's that whole grind. But again, we're connecting with people. We're using technology to connect with people. The people are the real goal there, right? That's who
Yeah.
you need. So yeah.
I've read that book, and that book is great. I'll co-sign that one. But yeah, you're definitely right. That's it. It is mostly it. I think people forget about that when they're on social media, trying to promote something or showing their work or just being on social media in general. I think people forget that you're there pretty much connecting with other people. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like you said, like people forget about that, and I think that's really important. I think that's a really great tip for people who are, trying to get their artwork out there, or anybody trying to do something online, that people should remember that they're actually supposed to be connecting with other people, not just, accounts. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. It's
Um,
another thing that Austin Kleon said in the book real quick. He said, the world's still a small place. Be nice. Right? That was his advice to artists. Like, don't be a D to everybody. The world is still a small neighborhood. Be nice. So yeah.
Definitely. So how do you stay from getting burnt out creatively?
Some artists deal with burnout. I've never, ever, ever had it. I have the opposite problem in that I constantly want to make something and show it to people, to the point where it can be quite a character flaw. Because if I don't get to do that, I'm kind of ho hum, right? I'll draw a stick figure and be like, look, guys, it's a figure, that's me every day. So I've never dealt with burnout. I have the opposite problem in that I have to rein myself in because I go from project to project to project, really passionate about it, and leave everything sort of 30% done. And I've had to learn, like, hey, man, channel that energy right back into here and keep going on this, and get this done. But I do think that some people, to try to answer your question, if I can give something that I think is insightful, I think people deal with creative block and burnout when they're too focused on the future and they're not actually really resonating in what they do every day. One thing that I try to teach myself, which is very, very hard, is I need to make some art that's just for me.
Mm,
I need to make art and show it to nobody, right?
mm.
2 hours a week, I'm going to make something, nobody sees it. It's just for me. And I'm still struggling with that. But I believe that's a key for many people that are dealing with burnout is you have lost some of the passion of just creating because there's so much rigmarole and runaround. And try to find something that, like if you look at Tolkien, I just read The Hobbit again and I was reading the intro to The Lord of the Rings. And it's fascinating that Tolkien's like, man, this thing took me 6 years. And he's like, parts of it I wrote thinking no one would ever read it. I just wrote it because I wanted to get this mythology down for me. And I'm like, and that's people's favorite parts of it.
Mm.
Their favorite parts of the stuff that Tolkien didn't write to put in the book. He was already a published author. The publisher was every day, give me a book, but he was still writing stuff that was just for him. And I think that's how you avoid a lot of burnout.
I think that's an amazing, amazing tip because, you know, I could see how people, how that could happen to people where they're focused on the outcome and not focused on actually putting in the work for like making the creative part and then just enjoying the creative process and thinking too much if someone's gonna like it or this, you know what I'm saying? Then that I could see how that could really get people burnt out. And it's funny that you're reading that because I'm actually reading the last book right now of
Oh, nice.
that's really funny.
Cool.
Um, so yeah, so what are some of your favorite projects or pieces that you've created? Like, what is like, what comes to mind? Like when you're like, I'm like, oh, what was like something that you really enjoyed working on? That was like, oh, I'm really proud of this piece. Really proud of the what I made right here. And this is like, you know, s- you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I'll give you two different answers to that because there's sort of like stuff that I'm super proud of that still ended badly for me, and there's stuff that I'm super proud of that's sort of just now coming in, and we're going to see how it goes.
Mhm.
But I got hired at a video game company around about 2012 that was called S2 Games in Michigan, and loved everyone there. Had the time of my life there for 2 years, but eventually they sort of closed up shop and moved on and just kind of laid us all off, which was sad for me. But I was working on a game as the creative director there, and the game was called Strife, and it was a MOBA like League of Legends or Smite or some of these other MOBAs that people play.
Mhm.
And I felt like we were making a world class game. Our engine was award winning. People that played the game said this is the best MOBA out there. Period. I mean, almost all of them. But we got swallowed up by some much bigger competition that had bigger budgets and just had a broader player base, right? And I had made all these amazing characters, and then to watch them get 3D modeling and get to watch them run around on a map and get to watch them shoot a laser beam and stuff for me was like, "Ah!" Like it's something I made is like alive in the game. And I did that for 2 years, and it was absolutely incredible. It was euphoric. It was like a dream. But that game just landed completely DOA, even though, in my opinion, it's one of the greatest mobile games ever made, better than League of Legends. This is not just my opinion. This is the prevailing opinion of people that have played it. An amazing, amazing game, but just found no audience because it was just up against juggernaut competition, you know?
Mm.
And it's sad for me still to this day to see there's still a small devoted fan base to that game that keep trying to bring it back, and they love the characters and they love, and they're like, oh my gosh, the keepers of the code and I designed so many elements that are in the map and stuff. It was just a really surreal, fun experience, but it died a swift death.
Mm.
So that's one of them. But Google's the MOBA Strife, if you're at all interested, look at some of the characters like Minerva and Rook and them, and you'll find that we were doing a great job on that stuff. And of course, I had a brilliant team that was working with me. A second one would be this project that we're actually a little bit talking about today, which is this Easy Kill 9 IP. And what I love so much about it is I've been kind of working on this idea since about 2007 or 8, fashioning the story and how the world might work, and had this idea for a world where zombies and vampires and werewolves have just suddenly exploded onto the scene. But the governments of the world are like, were people? Can we just kill them? Can we just destroy these creatures that now eat? Can we just snipe a werewolf? What happens when he or she turns back into a person? This incredible like human rights issue
Mm.
came about because these are clearly very dangerous parts of society, but the world can't grapple with the solution for it. And what if an undercover elite paramilitary team rose up to start sort of dealing some old world justice to these things, really just to save whole cities before they got completely overrun, to save families and workplace and stuff. So that's what Easy Kill 9 and the Undead Operator world is about. So I've had this story for 10 years, and it's evolved into these things. And to be able to design some of these characters, work with a great partner. I have a beautiful production partner called Zyka Toys, and to have these characters, I illustrated them and did all the colors and everything. I had full carte blanche creatively. It's my IP. But to have a partner come in and say, I'll help pay for some of those 3D models to be made. I'll get relations with the factory in China where I've already done toy runs, and we can actually do this thing. To have that come to life over the last year or so, and to now today be launching the Kickstarter and see people go, oh, I love that character. It's again surreal. It almost fills me with a little bit of of emotion if I were to wax too philosophical on it. But I really, really love this project. It's been a ton of fun. It's been a labor of love, and to see people saying, "Yeah, there's something cool there," that was very, very fun.
So Easy Kill 9 is the name of it. And there's a Kickstarter live right now. It just went live today. The
Yep.
link is in the description. Everyone could go check it out right now. So what you got the story. What is it? Is it a comic book? It's you said mentioned toys. You making like to make toys, or have you made toys? Oh,
The the campaign that launched today is for action figures. We have 4 completely done, ready for the factory action figures that we've created, and you can see pictures of the production models and stuff on the campaign. So we are saying, "Hey, partner with us. Let's get these 4 action figures funded. The rewards are that we'll give you, action figures for backing this, and they're done in the retro style of the 3 3/4 inch O-ring GI Joe figures that I loved as a kid. If you ever had like a little Snake Eyes figure in the 1980s, it's that form factor, but it's my heroes, the Easy Kill 9 heroes. But everyone that backs, by the way, is going to get a full digital comic book. And in a day or two, we'll post an update where we'll show you a page or two of that comic book because I'm drawing and I'm writing it. It's already under production. If you're going to give even $1 to the Easy Kill 9 campaign, you're going to get a full digital download of the first issue of the comic book when it's ready in late September, early October. So the story is going to be a comic book, but the campaign itself is for toys. Adult collectibles, these you could give these to kids, but we're designing these really for people my age, your age, John, people that are like, hey, I might not even take that out of the package. I just love the beautiful packaging. I love that painting. I love this action figure. I'm going to buy 4, put 3 of them in cold storage and let my kid play with the other, whatever it is. But it really is a line for people that love this idea of a quasi horror, paramilitary, strike force kind of vibe with a little bit of political intrigue. And so yeah, we've got 4 toys up for grabs, and I'm hoping we get all 4 of them funded in the Kickstarter.
So what inspired this project? You said you had the idea for the story for 10 years now. What inspired you to go for this project?
So here's a funny little story. I'm gonna try to keep this brief because you've asked a really pivotal question. Because really, what you're saying is, why now? Like, how did you suddenly decide that toys were how to bring this project to life, right? Instead of a comic or a novel or something, right? Because I've had the idea for since 2007 or 8. I won a contest a little over a year ago. Of course, as I said, I was a character designer in video games. I had this cool story of this undead operator world with this Easy Kill 9 team, right? You think of undead operator, it's like the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Easy Kill 9 would be like the Avengers, right? So both those names refer to the same project. But I'm like, what do I do with this? Well, I mentioned GI Joe a few minutes ago. The amazingly talented, godlike people that created the GI Joes that I loved as a kid, they're now retired from Hasbro and stuff, but they still commiserate with one another. They're still a group of really talented older men. And they put out a contest about a year ago saying, hey, we might launch a new small line of toys, like a limited run, just like the old O-rings, the 3 3/4, just like the Joes from back in the day, but new characters. And we want to take submissions. And if we get enough good submissions, we're going to use your submission to make one of these toys. And I said, well, here I am. And I submitted 3 prototypes of my Easy Kill 9 idea, just really, really loose prototypes, because I knew if I won, that it would become theirs and I would still want to be able to come and do my own thing, right? So I gave them these loose prototypes. Well, I won. I actually came up like in the very, very top. And to see that they were going to take one of my toys and sort of turn it into a real like GI Joe style action figure, I started paying very close attention to how that was done. And immediately said, okay, I'm in love with what they're doing. But again, like what I've said before, sometimes when you're working with a client or something, they make changes and things and they massage it a bit. And you're like, oh, I'm going to do my own too. So hand in hand while they're developing, and that group, by the way, is called Operation Recall. That Kickstarter happened last year. My figure was called Cadavers, and it's already got funded, and people are going to receive it, and they're doing beautiful work with that. So check out Operation Recall also, because some amazing stuff is happening there, and you'll also be able to buy a toy that's got my name on it. That's one of my concepts. But I decided, hey, I've got so many of these characters. There's so much of this story that I want to tell. Why not start with toys? Now that I sort of see how it's done and I can wrap my brain a little bit around what the creative process of that is, I'm going to give it a shot. So here we are today, launching this Kickstarter.
That's really, really dope. So what did you, was it right after you finished winning the contest, where you're like, with that exact moment, was that when you were like, all right, I'm going to do this?
When I won the contest, I immediately was like, oh, I've always wanted to, if they're going to make toys, I can make toys, right? And what I wanted to do really first, I think, was I wanted to work with them, and maybe that would have worked out if I had really pressed it. But I thought they're so busy and they're going to do such amazing work that let me not try to kind of insert myself. They already chose one of my one of my designs, let's just let them run with it. And I still work with them on something. Sometimes they need some color work and stuff done. They need like volunteers because there's several really talented people that submitted, and we kind of get together behind the scenes and we help them with some of the production just to save time. But yeah, I really said right then, I'm like, okay, now I know I'm going to make my own toys. Why don't I just begin? And so I did.
That's really really cool. I like that they're the GI Joe style ones, like size wise. I really like those. Those are really really dope. Yeah, I was checking out the Kickstarter. Everyone go check it out. The link is in the description of what we're talking about right now. And the toys look really really dope, like made, and they look really really cool. Everyone should go check it out right now. So so you had the story in mind, and then how'd you develop these characters? Like, were you like, all right, I'm gonna make this amount of characters, or did you already have these characters in mind while you were doing the story, like talking about the story?
I had only one character from when I first created the story. He's the head guy of the whole undead operator army. His name is Malcolm Zydek, or MZ. And he's actually the fourth one that we want to get funded in the campaign. If you go look at the campaign, you can see that character. He's all in red. He's got a little bit of black. He's got a sword and a big Widowmaker like mace staff. So I did have that one character, but I'd never illustrated him. I didn't know what he looked like. I knew I wanted him.
Mm.
But then I knew I wanted this whole team. He's kind of the head of the whole army. Then I wanted this elite force of these 9 really, really BA paramilitary operators. Oh, now I didn't know their names or their code names or particularly what they were, but I knew there were 4 classes of them. I knew there was a class that specialized in killing zombies. There was a class that specialized in killing vampire, the class that specialized in shapeshifters and werewolves, and the class that specialized in these almost like fallen angel creatures called the Rephium. So I had the story, I had one character, I had the name of a unit, and then I had these 4 specialists that I wanted to fit certain heroes into. And what I did then was I just sat down and said, okay, let's make one of these slayers, and I had submitted a quasi one to Operation Recall. So I had a little bit of a stab at sort of trying, oh, how might this guy look? And I deconstructed that a little bit, went harder with the archetype. Now, remember, this is what I did in video games, right? In video games, they would come to me and say, hey, man, we need this style of hero. It's got to be a big, tanky, like monster type hero that beats everybody up. He doesn't have any ranged weapons. He plays like this. And they would say, come up with a concept. And that's what I would do. I would identify an archetype that I thought everyone could rally around, something from history or something in the collective unconscious, as Jungian would say, as Carl Jung would say. I would nail an archetype, then I would say, okay, but let's not do the straight archetype. Let me add in some memorability twists. Let me not just give you the Hulk because you're asking me for the Hulk. Let me give you the Hulk with feet of ice. This is off the top of my head. Or let me give you the Hulk with, a 3-year-old vampire child that he's got to take care of. I would add in twists to it. Whatever I came up with, and then I would design the characters around that. And then once I had a really good concept, I would start illustrating and iterating. So that's also how I did the Easy Kill 9 heroes. I would say, okay, I need a Slayer. This is my guy that goes into the alleyways after dark and just mows down 50 zombies so the rest of the team can move freely, right? What weapon does he have? What are his colors? What does he need as far as armaments to not get bit? And I would keep those things in mind and would just start doing my process from back when I worked in video games, because I've drawn thousands of playable characters in my life. And I just drew off all those past inspirations and remixed it a bit and said, yeah, I like that. That's cool.
That's cool. That's cool. What has been your favorite part of working on this project, this new project?
I still really love the actual hero creation process. The thing that I was just describing, my love is to sit down and say, man, let me bring something to life that doesn't exist. Let me give this guy or this lady a name. Let me think about what they do. Let me think about what their superpowers are. If they've got superpowers, and build all that into a cool uniform, and type up a file card about who they are and where they came from. That's always been, I'm a storyteller. If we're going back to the very, very first thing we talked about, since I was 5 or 6, I just wanted to tell stories to people, and art and toys and comics are a way that allow me to do that. So I love that creative storytelling, world building aspect of it.
So what was it like working in for a video game character, like creating your own video game characters? Was it hard to come up with concepts when they gave you these ideas to do, or was it like straight up like you were ready to go right off the top of your head? Like, what was it like coming up with that?
You've asked me a mixed bag question, so let me try to answer it without going completely off the rails. So to answer it, like from my perspective, I was always ready because, as I say, I really don't struggle with a lot of creative block. I've already got like 17 ideas in the hopper, partly from other things, partly from something that's just a movie I saw, whatever. And I feel like I'm pretty good at assimilating a lot of other media and deciding what really sort of like touched people about it, what really resonated, and reforge that into something for a different project, right? And this
Mhm.
is the whole creative process that Austin Kleon talked about. What did he say? He said, you can't write a novel if you're not reading anything good. You can't make music if you haven't cultivated a fine set of albums that you listen to. He's like, creativity is subtraction. You've got to work up the family tree of creativity. You've got to pull all the little nuggets down and then make them your own, right? I feel like I'm pretty good at that. So in video games, they allowed me to do a lot of that type of stuff. So that part of the job was a dream. The fact that they paid me for it, the fact that there was like free lunch, free tacos every Tuesday, the fact that I could walk into the break room and get a Yahoo or whatever and just drink chocolate milk and just be a complete nerd and just throw fuzzy dice around. I mean, we had massive Nerf gun fights like in the office daily where people got like really critically injured, you know? It was a crazy, crazy fun job. But there also was the aspect of it that I still had masters to answer to. And there were times when bro, I was really in love with something and incredibly passionate about bringing it to life, and they just didn't want it.
Hmm.
And it was hard. I wish had been more disciplined then, like I am now, because it was hard for me to unmarry myself. It was hard for me to divorce that and go back and give them something that they wanted that was just as good. To be honest with you, a lot of times, again, character flaw in me, I'd go back and give them something that was not nearly as good because I couldn't rebuild. I could, but I chose not to rebuild my creative. You know, it was a real growing experience for me. So that several years later in a different job, I'm like, I wish that some of the soft skills I had now, just being able to let go of stuff
Hmm.
and just go back and say, hey, man, I don't agree with you, but you're the boss. And I want to give you something amazing no matter what. I wish I could circle back to that, you know, and do some of that stuff. So it was a tough job in the sense of I was still me and I had to get out of my own way, you know, but the job was a dream in every other aspect. And they were super nice to me. The video game industry has a bunch of people with big personalities in it. They were like, yeah, Jen's got a big personality too. It'll be okay.
That's amazing. So do you still collect comics and stuff like that?
I spent $15 on retro comics just last Saturday. I got 3 old GI Joes. I got 3 old X-Men, stuff man from Mark Silvestri and stuff that I had with the fall of the mutants and Genosis and stuff that I had bought off the rack, you know, in like 1987 as a kid. I went in there specifically looking for it. So I'm gonna get a few old Joes, stuff that I don't have, and I'm gonna get some Mark Silvestri X-Men stuff. And sure enough, they had it, and there was a summer sale on, and it came up to 17. And I told the guy, I've only got $15. And he's like, let's make it 15. And I walked out of there with like 5 or 7 dope comics. So yeah, man, I don't buy a whole lot of the new stuff, although sometimes I do. There is some of the stuff that still comes out that I really like. But I had lost my collection in a garage fire
Mm.
um, early early 2000s, and there's still a big hole in my heart from where all that stuff went. And so I'm kind of recollecting now. Yeah, just getting it back and reading it.
So do you play video games as well? You've designed them, but do you play them as well?
I do. I have a weird love-hate relationship with video games because I'm really creative and I'm really into the story. And a lot of times if it's a fast-paced game or an RPG where you know where you've got to do a lot of shots and stuff, I'm so busy absorbing the scenery and wondering, "Well, now why'd they put that tree there?" That I'm getting like shot in the head and stuff. It's the same thing with movies. Like I go to movies, I don't really watch movies. I'm like completely dissecting that film the whole time. It's very hard in video game, but I'll play a lot of retro games. Like almost twice a week, I'll go over to Bay City, which is a town not too far from me. They've got a retro arcade, and I'm playing like the very first stand-up Pac-Man, and I'm playing pinball and this type of stuff because those games I don't need to dissect them. You know, they're from my childhood. But if I'm going to sit down with Call of Duty or Grand Theft Auto or something like that, it's not going to go well because I'm so immersed in the world building that they did that I don't actually want to play the game.
Yeah.
You know, it's just really cinematic for me.
So what is some stuff that inspires you now? Like, where do you go for inspiration?
So we talked about how I just reread The Hobbit, right? And now I'm about to reread The Lord of the Rings because I actually spent a lot of the winter studying Tolkien. And there's a lot of stuff I don't like about him actually as a person. But I got a book that has all of the Christmas letters that he would write and illustrate every year to his kids. If you don't know, Tolkien would every winter he would write a letter as though it was from Saint Nick. And you don't know, Saint Nick had like trouble with goblins in the basement and polar bears. Every year he wrote these letters to his kids, and each year you get to see how like his kids would kind of age out, and the letter would be for a younger kid, you know. But to watch him illustrate on it, and you know, just the passion that he put into that stuff, I go to things like that for inspiration. So I also found an amazing book that were all the letters that Tolkien ever wrote to his publishing house. Incredibly fascinating stuff. So I've been studying sort of how people that really made an impact on the zeitgeist of culture and did very, because it's very difficult to write a novel. I've never been able to do it. This guy wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote. And after writing the 3 books of the Lord of the Rings, he said, my only complaint with it is it's too short. You know, he wanted the thing to be twice that long, you know. So I want to know a guy that does that, what keeps him at that typewriter every day?
Mm.
You know, what was it that he was holding on to? So those are the places and the little corners that I've been lurking and haunting to try to find like what's wrong in my creative process. Where am I still just not a really mature creative? Like if I'm going to get this campaign funded, I think we are, and these toys are going to become a good deal, and people are going to start loving the comic books. There's an audience there that's going to want this world to emerge.
Yeah.
Books, comics, more toys, posters, HBO streaming show. You know, I got plans, right? I have to be able to deliver. And so the places I'm going to now are really like, okay, how did these guys do this? What was their pacing? You know, and I want to absorb that stuff so that I'm prepped for the creative long haul on some of these things. Yeah.
So, so you've already got a lot of people backing this project. Where'd you find these people to start? You know, how'd you let these people know about this? Because you know it's easy to make stuff, but how'd you get the word out already? So like so early, it's already funded a lot of it, and it's
Thank you.
only the first day.
I think it's going to do really well. But here's the tale. I'm only going to tell you. I need everyone else on YouTube to turn off the volume. So you can come back on in 60 seconds. I only want John to know this. I launched this exact same campaign a little less than 1 year ago. It ended September 22nd, and it only had 44 backers. I don't even think it hit 10% of its goal. I knew it wasn't going to get funded. You say, why do you launch a Kickstarter campaign for a project that you have no prototypes for? You haven't put in any of the hard work. You know it's not going to get funded. Because I launched it about 2 weeks after Operation Recall, where they took my concept. I launched it about 2 weeks after that did get funded, because I knew people were watching me and people were watching what I might do. And I knew I could get an audience to pay attention if I did a big marketing thing like a Kickstarter. So I launched it. I hoped it would get funded. If it had been funded, great. But my funding goal was like $100,000, you know. But there was a lot of art and a lot of story and narrative that went on that first campaign. And some people paid attention to it, because what am I always saying? It's not what you know, it's who you know.
Yeah.
So it was just me, you know, in my kitchen after work making this stuff. And when I launched the campaign, I only had like 30% of the collateral. I still had all this art to do every day, but I pulled it out and I did. And it was a good campaign, but it didn't get funded. I did that though, so that partners would come to me, and then they did. Because almost immediately after that, my best partner, my production manager, Craig from Zyka, got in touch with me and said, man, there's a really nice story here. It looks like you need some figures and stuff actually made. Do you have any money for it? I said, I've got a little. He said, why don't we make some prototypes and we'll do your Kickstarter again? And I was like, that's the word that I was waiting for. So that's how I think we have a decent audience now, because since last year, August, me and Craig have been doing this art and planning the comic book and making the concepts better and deciding which ones were the key characters and looking at, okay, we need these 11 marketing pieces. We need the card backs done with completely final art and stuff. So we've spent a full year slowly making it and showing it to people, so that when it came time for today, we could be like, yeah, there are people that absolutely want this, that are now very happy with the fact that we have prototypes done and we've got a factory on the line and our pricing is locked in. Let's launch it again. And I think we're going to do pretty good.
Yeah, I mean it's been amazing so far already. So what was it like? How'd you end up meeting your production person? How did that, was it online?
Well, you'll love this. I was on a podcast towards the very end of my first campaign, when it was pretty clear it wasn't going to get funded, some friends of mine, they run a podcast called What's on Joe Mind. Joe, not your. What's on Joe Mind, which I'll be on there actually tonight at about 9:00 because
Nice.
a year ago they had me on. They're bringing me on.
That's
They're
sick.
fantastic. Yeah, and one of the guys that helps run it worked for Hasbro and was head over like GI Joe and some things. And he really knows his stuff. And they had me on, and my partner watched me on that podcast. Yeah, live, kind of on the interwebs, and reached out to me a day or two later, like, "You really do have this story down. I really would like to see this come to pass, and can we make a partnership?" So yeah, again, man, it's really about, I went on that podcast. Those guys were great. This just circles back some things we talked. It was pretty clear I wasn't going to get funded, but they were willing to give me 3 hours of their night, to say, "Hey, man, let's just talk about what you've been doing here and what the future holds and stuff." Because again, it's people first. You can be as creative as you want. If you're a D-hole, I'm like, I want to get out and talk to people. I want to know what's on their mind. They want to know what's on Joe's mind, etc. And I just began to say, let me just keep putting this work in front of people and let me show up for their stuff too. And that's how I think you get good partners and project, because I don't have, 50,000 people on my Twitter or whatever, but the people that are there are pretty invested in what I'm doing.
Yeah, definitely. That's actually really, really dope that that it worked out like that. That's really
Yeah.
sick. So everyone watching live right now, you guys could ask Cybertooth Cat your own question. We're putting the form in the chat, and you guys can ask your own question. He'll be answering all the questions at the end of the show. We got a bunch already, so I know everybody listening right now is probably hyped up right now. Um, so like, what is some advice you could give somebody who's like kind of like on the edge and not really sure if they really want to like take the jump to do a big project or to be creative? What is some advice you could give some of those people?
Specifically, if we're talking about a big project, you just have to eat that elephant one bite at a time. In that same Comic Con where I met Brian Stelfreeze and he told me about the effing editors or whatever, I talked to one of my other heroes that was there. His name's Frank Quitely. Frank Quitely he illustrated the All Star Superman trade paperback graphic novel. Just incredible, incredible illustrator. He was the first illustrator on Jupiter's Landing, Jupiter's Legacy, from Image. So this guy's a really brilliant comic book illustrator. And I walked up to Frank Quitely and I showed him my portfolio, and he said this to me. He said, "You should draw your own book." And he said, "I want you to know," he said, "the way your first page looks and the way your last page looks are going to be completely different." He said, "Because you're so on the cusp of really breaking into like a whole new style right now that every page you draw is going to be like a different artist doing it." And so he's like, "But you need to do it."
Mm.
And I was like, "Okay." And I did. I went and I did it. And he was right. So I would say to some of those people that want to do a big project right now, do it, but you might have to scrap it when you're done, because the artist and the creative person that you're going to find on that journey is going to change, is going to get stronger, is going to become more brilliant. And you need to draw that first comic book, or you need to make that first indie film, or you need to cut your first record so that you can be like, "Yeah, 99% of that was garbage, but dude, the next one I do is going to be lit." There's just no cheating the process. So yeah,
Mm.
and when you do that, you got to eat that elephant one bite at a time. You just got to get up every day like, "Hey man, this might never be nothing, but I'm going to look around the room when it's done and be like, I got that done." And the way that'll change your life is profound. You know what I'm talking about, man. You
Yeah.
built your brand, I'm sure, from one little T-shirt here or there. I mean, look at you in Zoomies and stuff, dude. The hustle that I see at WHADAFUNK every day is legendary, bro. That didn't come overnight. I know it didn't.
No,
Like, you had
no.
to grow into that, Yeah.
Definitely. No, yeah, I definitely agree with you. It is all about like the process is really the whole entire thing, to be honest. You know what I'm saying? I think a lot of people miss out on that and miss out on enjoying it and actually doing it and miss out on seeing what comes after that. You know what I mean? Like you're saying, like your next project could even be even better because of what you're working on, because you had the guts to try the first one.
Right on.
So what I wanted to ask you was, so like the future of art is changing. You know what I'm saying? Now there's AI. There's Photoshop has things now where you could generate a fill, which if someone doesn't know what that means, is it just fills in what they think it is instead of what it is. Like, so art is changing like rapidly. How do you feel about AI, like AI art?
So I'm going to give you a broad philosophical answer about where art is at, and then I'll tell you how I actually feel about AI art. Okay. And try to keep me accountable here because I want to give you this broad answer. Then I want to talk about AI twofold. One is sort of what it's actually doing.
Hmm.
And then secondarily, like I want to talk just a hint about the technology itself, right?
Hmm.
Not being an expert, but I'll give you my opinion. So the first thing you kind of said was, broadly, where is art at? I have taught the history of graphic design and art at a few different schools. And the first thing you learn teaching it is this: it's always gone in cycles. There's always been a feedback loop with art, and it goes like this: really amazing people doing really artist stuff that defines culture, then a mass swell of some type of technology sort of replicating it, then everybody doing it badly, then a complete crash, and then a new emergence of really artur people doing incredible stuff and changing culture, but with a different set of tools
Hmm.
sometimes, right?
Hmm.
So there's this circle, and we are right now at crash and burn. If you go on TikTok, okay, if you go on Instagram, if you look at, God bless them, they're beautiful. If you look at, that 17-year-old girl that's dancing in her kitchen every day and has 50,000 followers and is set for life, flush it all. That's just garbage.
Hmm.
Anyone can do it. You're playing to the algorithm. You're wearing tight clothing. We're calling it art. It's not. It's dancing. I don't think it's art, right? This is just my opinion. What I'm saying is we're at this critical mass stage in culture, especially with the emergence of AI, where I think we're about to hit that complete burnout phase where everything just becomes synonymous garbage.
Hmm.
From that wreckage, I am expecting some truly amazing artists to arrive on the scene who don't use AI, who are like, nah, man, let me tell you how I do my art. And you're going to get that wonderful resurgence of a whole new type of street art, a
Hmm.
whole new type of comic book, if it's even a comic, a whole new type of movie. In fact, I think we're getting some of this in movies now, really, where over the next few years, I think you're going to see some films come out that are just like if you watch Oppenheimer, dude, Oppenheimer was an acid trip. That's not the way Nolan used to make movies. This is Nolan being like, screw everyone. This is how I make this movie. Because he doesn't care
Hmm.
what it does at the box office. It's clear. And I left that movie absolutely in love with it and absolutely hating it at the same time
Hmm.
because it's so powerful. But he took it so artur that I had a hard time watching it. But that's the beginning of this thing that I think is coming, where people are like, heck with all the expectation and the algorithms and the AI and everything. I've got a thing inside of me that I want to make, and I'm going to make it my way, and I'm going to go balls to the wall with it, and this thing's going to be lit. And I think we need that resetting. So
Hmm.
that's my thing on art, is I believe we're in the standard loop, and we're at like crash and burn phase. And over the next few years, you're going to see some really interesting and powerful things happen.
Interesting.
Your art is still very analog. You're not using, you're still like, rolling it on shirts and doing stuff that requires all kinds of physical material and the apparatus of your actual body to do those prints and stuff, right? So I
Hmm.
applaud you on it. But to talk to I think it's an exciting time with AI for some purposes. I think there's some things that AI is good for, right? Like maybe writing some software code, maybe helping students create a rough draft. And some of people be mad at me. Create a rough draft of a short story or even a report or something like that that they can then go in and say, because anyway, I think there's some good things AI. I don't want to go too much into. I do think, to go to the technical side of it, that there's some very serious dangers with
Hmm.
artificial intelligence. We're at a threshold where it's like, I hope that you've Skynet locked that thing down, because I don't want T1000 in my backyard type of thing. And that sounds really cliche, right? But the idea is, if something's going to be this smart and this powerful, we do need to have conversations about exactly where, when, and how that is limited, so that things don't become a danger for security, a danger for privacy, a danger for, all those issues that we're already dealing with deep fakes and all this type of stuff on the internet. You add really into, and I don't think we've seen where AI is going to go yet. I think it's still a child in the crib kicking for a bottle. I mean, this thing grows up, dude. I don't know. So yeah, so it's a mixed bag, but it's a really interesting time.
Yeah, that's really interesting about the cycles. I've never thought about that, but that's really interesting that you're saying about that. But yeah, I agree. The AI is, you don't know what's, it's very early, so you don't really can't really tell what's exactly is happening with it. Um, what I wanted to ask you was, going back to the early days, and then guys, at the end of the show, we're gonna be asking your questions live. So we got a bunch ready to go. But first, before we get into that, I wanted to ask you, like, how did when you were young, how did you learn to draw? Like, because you said, like, how'd you learn to draw? Like kids always try and draw, but like, you know what I mean? How'd you learn?
I'll try to. I remember a very pivotal moment where I had. What I would do is I would sit at the kitchen table, or I would sit at, you know, down in my my bedroom is in the basement, sit on my bed because I didn't have a drawing table or anything. Like my parents weren't springing for that stuff. I had regular like notebook lined paper or whatever and a pencil. And I would just find a hard surface, to put that paper on. And I would look at my count books and stuff and try to get all like juiced up. And then I would try to replicate what they were doing.
Hmm.
But I wasn't having much success with it. At the age of like 8 or 9, I was trying to draw a He-Man character one day.
Yeah.
And I couldn't figure out how the feet go. And my feet were like going straight down into the ground and stuff. And that same older brother, his name is Andrew, who came to me one day, and I don't know if he really believed it or if he just knew that it was like the right thing to say. But he said to me, he said, "Man, if you would really like slow down and actually give it your all and just not be defeated, I think you'd do some really great stuff." And for whatever reason, I chose to receive that.
Mm.
Now, that was a pivotal moment because then I knew, like, I'm going to keep sticking with this. The problem was then that took me to a place where I actually did develop a degree of talent, and I did develop to a place where I could draw some nice stuff. But that also played a trick on my mind where I felt like I could cheat the process, right? You asked me a little bit ago, what do I say to artists? I'm like, don't cheat that process, man. Go take a good class, learn to draw some traditional stuff, put in the time, listen to other people. I got to where I'm like, no, if I just sort of like elbow grease it and persevere through this, like I'll be able to get to this career and nobody will be able to tell me nothing. I'll have done it all myself. And that's a really toxic mindset to
Mm.
get into. It's taken me decades to break out of it. I still struggle with it, right? This idea that, like, whoa, 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 whoa. My art doesn't have to be all about me. As a form of expressivism, I can let myself go a little bit. I can check ego at the door and I can try new techniques and things that somebody said was cheating or whatever. And I can be like, no, I'm going to decide where art works for me and stuff, and how can I be the most prolific artist that I can be. So I'm grateful for that pivotal moment that he gave me, but I also know it exposed some character flaws in me because I then from that point on thought, I don't need anybody, I can just do this. And you can't create in a vacuum, and you'll never be everything you're supposed to be if you don't let other people put their touch on you.
Mm.
You have to receive even some stuff that other people say to you from time to time. You don't have to receive all of it. Some of it's just dumb advice. But when you know somebody's saying something that you should look into or you should receive, it's important to do that. So I don't even know if I really answered your question, but as a young kid, it was just a lot of perseverance and stick to itiveness and just drawing, 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 drawing all the time.
Um, that's really awesome. I have one more question for you, or actually a couple more questions, but I want to ask you, you have very like distinctive style. Like, what are some tips that you could give to somebody trying to come up with their own like style of, of artwork or anything?
So I actually have, 5 or 6 really distinctive styles because it depends on what my project is. I have sort of like a workflow or a bag of tricks for that particular project, because you do want to have a noticeable commercial style, right? Um, and I think because for me, because I've worked in a lot of different actual industries, I had to pick up tools that normally I wouldn't use. But then when I got familiar with the tool and got good with it, I'm like, I'm going to make a style based around that too. So I can be really commercial, right? So I have like this Pokemon type style I do that's very thin lines with just flat color, highlight, shade, and then I have the more illustrative type style I do, like what you're seeing on the Easy Kill 9 campaign, where it's almost kind of painterly and stuff. And then I have an in between sort of comic booky type style, which is my favorite style, which is where I don't do as much of the painterly, soft shadows and stuff, but I do experimental things with different like manga brushes, digital manga brushes. Like Photoshop will let you download. If you have Photoshop and you're interested in learning to digital paint, go get all their free brushes. Just Google like, hey, free Photoshop brushes on, Adobe Creative Cloud. Get all those and monkey around with those because there's some brilliant free stuff out there. But I love this one that's called the Manga Set because it's got some crunchy, sort of like hard edge brushes that look like you're writing on newsprint. And it's got some others that are really like glossy and slick and stuff. So I love to use a blend of 3 or 4 of those brushes and just hint at certain architectures. And it comes across feeling very intentional, like intentionally graphic, but it still has, in my opinion, all the emotion and the humanity of like the more painterly stuff that you're seeing out on that Easy Kill 9 campaign. So to answer specifically though your question to other people, how to develop a style, you've got to decide what you like to a certain degree. You can't be everything to all people. Decide what you like and just try to master that one style. And then just know that you may need to end up with 3 or 4 or 5 or 7 different workflows with different styles. And that's okay.
Yeah.
So I think pick one and just go for it,
That's awesome advice. All right, so let's get into some questions. We got a couple questions here from people watching. Shout out to everybody who's watching live right now. Really appreciate everybody watching live right now.
Hey guys.
Let's get into these questions. Let me pull them up real quick. All right, so the first question, this is a good question, which I forgot to actually ask you. It was on my list of questions to ask you. From Anonymous. All right, first question. Where did the name Cybertooth Cat come from?
Yeah, that's a great question. I got commissioned to do a logo for a friend of mine, a really great friend of mine who makes his own music. He's also a really brilliant video editor. He works as a video editor by day. His name's Caleb, but he makes his own music, and he had come up with this moniker for himself. And I'm very angry that right now it has completely slipped my mind what his name was. But he said, "Man, I want like sort of like a robot face logo for this." And he gave me some insight. And I drew up this robot face, and we put his lettering stuff on there. He was like, "Yeah, that's dope." Well, I did 4 or 5 initial sketches for him, and one of them was of this metal-faced cat with the saber tooth teeth, like a saber-toothed tiger coming down, like the strong teeth that point down. And he didn't really like it. It wasn't really fitting for him. But I took one look and it was like, bro, it's about to be my logo. And it struck me that it was a saber-toothed cat, but it was cybernetic. So I said, "Oh, that's a cyber-toothed cat." And I was like, stick it, put it on a t-shirt. That's me. Yeah. Happy accident.
I love it. That's amazing. All right, let me pull up the next question. You kind of already answered this question, but we'll ask it again. Favorite project you've ever worked on or been a part of?
Really, this one right now. I mean, hands down, this Easy Kill 9 undead operator thing, because I really have a fun vision for it, and I think it's got legs. I think it's going to go places, and people are going to really respond to it. So whether the toys get funded or not, this thing's going to become something. So, and because it's completely me, and I really have carte blanche, and I've really been able to take my time and bring this to life, it's probably my favorite thing that I've done.
That's dope. Another question from Look Inside Your Passion. Question is, which do you prefer, cartoon or realistic drawing?
I really love cartoon art. It's so freeing. If I'm going to sit down, especially with an actual pencil and paper, I love to just draw cartoons, cartoon animals, cartoon figures, cartoon superheroes and stuff, where I don't have to try to get the anatomy and everything just right. It's really just about the form of line and the fluid motion and stuff that's going through there, and the suggestibility and things. And I found that some people really like my cartoons and some people just don't like them. For some people it borders too much on some other things they've seen, and people immediately start to kind of pick it apart. And I'm like, no, bro, it's just bro, just do that for fun. It's just a cartoon. So I found it's easier to be more commercial with the higher end stuff, like the more painterly, like really rich illustration stuff. But my love really still is, just the cartoons for sure.
This question is from Grizz. Shout out to Grizz. Help me fix the headphone situation.
Grizz.
That's why we were
Thanks,
late.
bro.
All right. So how did it feel working on the Star Wars cards, and how did it feel seeing them when they came out?
I had too much fun working on the Star Wars cards. I could have done that for the rest of my life, and that could have just been like my whole thing. But the pay was dreadful, bad, terrible. You know, they pay you the way that they pay you real quick, and I'll try to actually answer your question is you get paid like $1 or $3 per card. You're doing like 100 of them, and you're putting in like 3 hours, 5 hours, 6 hours on the card, and you pay like $3, right? But then at the end, they give you a certain allotment, like 8 or 10, if you will, of your own that you can illustrate and sell yourself, and it's still official merchandise. But I found that by the time I got to that part of it, I was over it, bro. Like, I had done my best stuff on the actual set that was going out to people because I wanted it to be amazing, and it just wasn't a moneymaker for me at all. Plus, if you draw 300 pieces of art on a canvas this big, after a while you just start going, I need to do something different. So, but like I'm drawing like really fun, because you could take the part that was cool about it, to answer your question, was you could take stuff that was in the movie or in one of the movies, and you could take a moment and you could sort of draw that moment your way. So I did some stuff that people really liked where I had like Obi-Wan with his head down, his hood kind of coming over his eyes and his saber in front of him and just the light shaft going up and like the twin suns or whatever setting behind him. And people went nuts over some of that stuff. And I was like, yeah, yeah. And I love to draw Boba Fett. So I got really artistic with it and really creative and fun with it. But what I found was the really, really good guys, they were doing everything full color, right? So now you've got another several hours of work to do. And they're using these Copic brand markers, which are these beautiful oil-based markers that you can blend and do almost photorealistic effects. And I'm like, I cannot get $3 a card and pay $9 a marker. Like I just can't do it. And so I only had 4 or 5 of them. And so I had a really limited color palette and I was doing what I could with it, but it just became a big time suck
Hmm.
and it became a big physical expense. And I just am not enough of a hustler to sell those cards at the end for 2 or 3 or $400 a piece and kind of make a, really make a run at it. That was just felt kind of soulless to me. I really just wanted to do good stuff and kind of receive a decent wage. So it was a ton of fun. And again, it'll suck you in. You'll be like, I'm going to do this for the rest of my life, but I was like, nah, I need to go do, I need to develop my own projects and stuff. I can't, work for Star Wars card sets for the rest of my life. Plus there's no money in it.
Yeah. Next question, a two-part question. I'll do the first one. Did you save all of your sketchbooks?
I have saved all of my sketchbooks from the past. So my brother actually has like a whole stack of them. My younger brother Aaron has some that are from like my teen years and stuff, and he guards those like trolls guard a treasure trove. Like I'm never going to see those again. But he brought them out a year or two ago and showed them to me, and boy, was that a surreal moment. So I do have a bunch of my old ones. The stuff from my 20s and 30s is largely gone because, again, like garage fire and just some life changes and stuff. But I have everything for the past 5 years or so. I mean, I could just one time I want to do a video of me just setting some of those things because even when I look back through them, I'm like, crap, I draw a lot of fun stuff. Just set those down on a table with an overhead camera and just leaf through it and talk for 10 seconds about each one. I got to do that sometime because I think people would find it fascinating. I certainly would. But yeah, I have a lot of my physical artwork, like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pages, still sitting and, in
Yeah.
a closet safely. Yes, it's a
You
big
sh-
win for
you
me.
should definitely do that, going through the book. That would be really cool.
It would be cool.
The part two of that question is, do you have a favorite drawing?
I'm sorry, you broke up just a
Oh,
touch.
sorry. It said the part two of the question was, do you have a favorite drawing?
No, and every time I do go through my old sketchbooks, honestly, there's that drawing you find that you completely forgot about that you're like, crap, man, if I had put that on a t-shirt and really gone hard on it, that would have been something. Because and it's not again, I'm not saying I'm an amazing artist, but it's really fun for me
Mm.
to go back and look at my old stuff and have that moment where I'm like, I love that. I totally forgot that I did that. That was boss. So no, I've got thousands of favorite drawings, unfortunately.
Next question. You kind of answered this, but how do you keep your creative juices flowing and stay inspired?
So aside from I think some of the stuff we talked about earlier, which is just that I don't really have a problem with that because I've got such a big personality or something that I always want to show off my work. But there is a certain something to be said for kind of getting your personal life in order.
Mm.
This is another thing that Austin Kleon said in his book, How to Steal Like an Artist. He's like, man, you need like a bedtime. Like you can't be out till 3 in the morning, like doing it up with the bohemians and stuff and living that whole like starving artist thing. He's like, bro, you got to take care of your faculties if you want to make art long term. Like, you got to get some sleep, you got to sort of eat right, get some exercise and stuff like that. Because I do think a lot of what we go through is physical, and it's what we're eating, and it's just sort of some of the habits that we're keeping. Some of the creative blocks and the artistic blocks we come into, is really just, you just kind of need to take care of yourself better as a person. So I recommend getting some of that under control too, because I think it gives you a baseline that you can springboard off from to be the most creative that you can be.
That's some great advice. All right, and this is the last question. Unless someone wants to ask another question, the form is in the chat. I know a bunch of people just hopped in here right now. But here's another question from Eyes Wide Open. Shout out to Eyes Wide Open. Would you rather make it big with your figures or your drawings?
So to caveat, I think it's going to be both, but let me go ahead and try to answer the question in the spirit that it was given. Like, if I had to choose,
Yeah, if you
right?
had to choose, pretty
Chad,
much.
yeah, like Chad, do you want to make it big on your art, or do you want to make it big through toy sales? Absolutely with the art, because I feel there's more story for me to tell there. My hope with the toys is there's more stories for other people to
Mm,
tell there, right? Toys get funded and they buy them, they can have their own adventures. They can write, and I'm very excited about that for
yeah.
people, especially if I get to see some of that happen. So if you're asking me from a selfish perspective, my art, because it's my story and I'm telling it my way. But if I'm being sort of the bigger person and really thinking about it a bit more deeply, it might actually be better for the world, if we're going to say something weird like that, to have success with the toys so that everyone kind of gets to tell their Easy Kill 9 story, because that's kind of the nature of toys and play. And it's a very, very cool thing. But art is sort of my official answer.
Yeah. So first I want to give a shout out to everybody watching right now. Thank you for watching live. I'm gonna give a
Thanks, Eric.
shout out to you, Cybertooth Cat. But before we go, do you want to tell people anything more about the new project that just launched on Kickstarter today?
If I can have just 2 or 3 minutes to kind of just walk people down the garden path, for those of you that might be interested in backing the campaign, first I would ask you, whether you're watching this live or you're catching on the replay or something, please do click the link and go check out the campaign. Because even if you have no interest in funding it or whatever, I would love for you just to see it, because I do believe that we made a world-class campaign. I believe there's a lot of story on there. I believe there's a lot of narrative. I think there's a lot of heart and soul in there, and I think you might enjoy just looking at it. So I would say, hey, do an art guy a favor and just go check out that campaign. And by all means, if you feel moved to back it, we would love to have you as a backer. I think these toys are going to be really, really going to be something, and a nice collector's item for a lot of people. But what I would like to tell you about that campaign is, it's the story and everything that goes in it is well over 10 years in the making, maybe more, like 15 or 16, right? There's a lot of heart and soul in there. And I really think we've got some big plans that are going to be fun. So if you go and you check it out, I hope that you'll bookmark it and maybe find us on the social medias and things like that, and kind of follow our journey a little bit. But just to give you real quick some of the practical stuff that went into creating this campaign, right? So I had to come up with the whole story idea. I had to write like a short synopsis of the world and kind of how the players in the world move. And I've got already, 2 or 3 dozen characters that I've really fleshed out, that I have concept art for and everything: bad guys, good guys, werewolf, vampires, slayers, killers, interrogators, the whole thing. So there's been a lot of sort of high level world crafting that happened, but then it came down to where it was time to actually do this thing. That I was like, okay, I have to actually illustrate these characters. So the way that works, because someone asked me about sketchbooks, is even with Easy Kill 9, in spite of my more digital workflow now, I got out physical sketchbooks. And I looked at what the old masters had done back in the day. They would get out these spec sheets and they would, create like a graph and decide just how high the figure is and what the dimensions are of the figure. And once they had some concept sketches, they would go in and actually draw the figure sort of to scale as a toy.
Mm,
So I have those drawings, physical drawings that I did for each one of these characters. So as the campaign goes on, if you're interested in just following it, whatever, we're going to do some updates where I just show some of those early creative sketches and sort of where it's gone from just 2D, me on paper figuring out what that shoulder pad looks like, to the 3D printed model and the turnarounds, the virtual turnarounds of those models. So we went through this whole process of sort of creative iteration and tried not to cheat any of the sort of the necessary or the fruit bearing steps of it. Then we give all those designs to a modeler and we say, this is exactly it. Like, this is what it looks like. Can you model it? And they do. And sometimes it comes back like, okay, her hair just doesn't really work like that because the head won't turn. Okay, well, what can we do with the hair? Let's make that a pliable piece of plastic. Let's move it a little bit further up the back of her head. Whatever it is, little changes like that to come in. Or, hey, the gun's not big enough. Can you change the handle so that the left hand fits into the, there was some back and forth massaging of sort of like, we virtualize this thing, but if I'm going to print it, the guns need to fit in the hand and the skateboard needs to fit under her foot and this type of thing. So we had some back and forth in the actual production process, but then we printed them on high-end like 8K resin printers, assembled them, made sure they all moved right and everything. We're very happy with that, and then sent it off to professional painters that paint these figures, round the clock every day, so that you have something sort of photo production ready to send to the factory. And those, what we call those paint master figures, we'll be showing those off at various conventions. I know for a fact they'll be at PowerCon, which I believe is in Atlanta on August 12th. So if anyone sees this and you're on the PowerCon area, you can go and see the Easy Kill 9 prototypes in person at the Zyka booth there. So we've had this whole process that we've gone through. I think the campaign is a really, really good campaign. I do think it's going to get funded, and hopefully we'll get it funded at a really high level so all 4 of the figures get unlocked, and anybody that backs it can choose, let's say you back it at 4 figures or 8 or 2, you can choose. Let's say you back it at 8 figures. We've got 4 figures offered. If they all get funded at $18,000, 1 figure is done and funded, and we call the campaign a success. That means that anybody that backs it is going to get a figure. They're going to get that bludgeon figure, the first one, right? But if we can get up to, $72,000 or something like that, where we can afford to have all 4 of them produced, let's say you back it at 4 figures, you can get 1 of each. Or you can get 3 of one and 1 of the other because 2 of them you didn't like so much. You know what I'm saying? You can start mixing and matching how you want your rewards to be. And so that's the number that we're really kind of pushing for, is to get all 4 of them funded. Will be funded and 1 toy completely locked in at 18,000. Right. And everybody that backs is, if you're back for 2 figures, you're going to get 2 of that figure. If you're back for 4, you're going to get 4 of that figure. Right.
Gotcha.
What we want to do is get up into those higher numbers so that if you back it 2, 4, 8 figures, you can pick and choose the assortment of how you want your rewards to come, which figure you want multiples of, which maybe you don't want any of, etc. I think that will be just more fun, for the people backing the campaign. Yeah.
That's cool. What's next after it's backed? What's the next step?
Yeah, so we've got the models completely ready. We've got the factory prototypes ready. Now, Craig from Zyka is my production partner. He'll actually kind of handle the next part, but I believe the next part is getting those prototypes either 3D virtually modeled and send the soft copies to the factory, or actually sending those painted resin produced models to the factory. We'll send them the production files no matter what. They're going to get high end, 8K, like 3D virtual turnaround models. But then that factory needs to prototype the tooling, design the paint decos, match up colors, all this stuff. And then they'll produce a prototype and send it back to us. And when we have the prototype, then we'll really look at it because the actual PVC completely production model figure. And if it's good, we say, do the run. If it's not good, we say, okay, we need some corrections here. So there may be some back and forth once this is funded between us and the factory. We've got the materials locked in, the factory's on board, we've got the prototypes, we're in really good shape. But there can always be some back and forth between us and the factory in China on sort of what does that actual end product really look like. And I don't know how long that takes, but that process is what comes next.
I see. I'm really excited about this project, and I hope everybody listening or watching is hyped up too.
Thank you.
First, I want to say shout out to everybody who tuned in tonight live. If you're watching the replay, shout out to you for watching it. I want to give a huge shout out to Cybertooth Cat. Where can everyone find you? How can they get in touch with you if someone wants to connect with you?
Yeah, on Instagram, it's cybertooth.eth. So cybertooth.eth. That's my Instagram handle. On Twitter, it's CybertoothK. Just leave off the AT at the end.
Cool. I want to say thank you once again for coming through and, I feel like people really got hyped up on this one. Got a lot of great insight. Got inspired. Hopefully everyone got inspired. Stay on after we end. I want to talk to you after. But shout out to everybody for tuning in. Thank you so much. Guys, 24-hour live stream Thursday. Make sure you're tuned in if you're watching this live right now. So I want to give a huge shout out to you. Thank you so much for hanging out with us tonight. And
My pleasure.
thank you again, everybody, for watching. We'll catch you on the next one. Peace, everybody.